All right, guys, what's going on? Lazy Sunday today, and a little bored around the house, and I kind of wish I'd done this video a couple weeks ago. Um, I talked to my girlfriend and Comic Quarter 14, and a guy at work that was like, I wonder if people would be interested in this, and they kind of encouraged me to do it, so here it is, okay? But comic book channel. I'm always talking about stories that I like, the storytelling aspects of it, different ways to tell the story, how to read a story. There's all kinds of different ways to do it. But I'm really into music too, and always have been. And I always really liked getting in there and hearing stories as I was growing up. Of course, you didn't have the internet back then, so I'm going to tell the story the way it came together as I was growing up. And I just think it's really interesting. I think it can be relevant today. The two bands I'm going to talk about, a band and a performer, if you will, Devo, okay? And here's another album by Devo for you guys out there. And Neil Young. Neil Young, big folk singer, man from Canada. Harvest Moon, all these great records. Crosby, Stills and Nash, Godfather of Grunge, all sorts of little names attached to him and stuff. But there was a point in time where he was really wondering about his relevance, and that's what I'm going to talk about because I'm at the age where this story sort of unfolded as I was growing up. And my stepdad's friends and the people that were into Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and had their record collections and stuff would tell these stories, right? So I'm going to tell it exactly how it was when I grew up. No fact checking or no anything like that. Okay, but basically going back to May of 1970, there was Kent State University in Ohio. And the thing about Kent State, what was going on back then, especially with Kent State, is that there was a demonstration because I think one of the things about Nixon getting elected is he said he was going to end the war in Vietnam. And then all of a sudden in 1970, I think it was around April or something like that, he pretty much said that they're going to invade Cambodia and he's going to have to draft 150,000 extra people. Okay, so there was demonstrations, and in Ohio at Kent State, there was a demonstration. A lot of people came out against that, against Nixon and everything like that, and the governor of Ohio sent out the National Guard, and this was just horrible because they ended up uh, shooting at some people. Now, here's where the storytelling comes in, where things get a little bit romanticized or made to sound cooler and things, right? But on that day at Kent State, when the National Guard was there, were some members who would become Devo. I've heard it was one, and I've heard it was two. And this really kind of influenced the whole idea of what they've been coming up with because they had a friend who came up with the idea of de-evolution. We're not evolving, we're devolving. We're going to a herd mentality, and they ended up becoming performance artists with their music, Mark Mothersby and everyone, and they kind of went up. But at the same time, the two stories I heard was Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young were like somewhere like out near the woods, and Neil Young supposedly went into the woods with his guitar and appeared from the woods with a song about called Ohio about it. First lines were "Tin soldiers and Nixon's coming" and things like that. And then I also heard that it was the fact that pretty much Neil Young was just reading Life magazine, saw the pictures, and came up with it. Devo were not. They sort of came out of the idea that like these are rich hippies, kings of granola and stuff, were really just making money off of this big tragedy. So, they already had their mind kind of set up the way the story goes, right? So we flash forward a few years into the late 70s there, and you have the Sex Pistols come out. You have punk movement. You have Devo coming out with their performance art, appearing on Starting Out Live and everything like that. And Neil Young met Devo somewhere along the line and really wondered about his relevance. The 60s were definitely like ending. And Neil Young sort of wondered what's going to happen to me. So what I thought was amazing about this are these, two completely different styles of music and approaches and philosophy on life and everything. Neil Young didn't just sort of, you know, lash out. He didn't kind of retreat. He sort of like started doing it through music and like, am I relevant or not? What's going on here? What's going on here? Stuff like that. So we ended up getting this song called "Hey Hey My My," and it was taking in everything that was going in at the time. Uh, it has lines in it like "The king is dead and not forgotten. This is the story of Johnny Rotten," because it's in 1977 Elvis had died, and you also had the rise of punk breaking out thanks to the Sex Pistols. So that one line is actually like where music history was kind of connecting at the same time through his eyes. And then he had this classic line in the story, that I always thought it was maybe a saying that was just going around, but supposedly Neil Young really came up with it. It was better to burn out than to fade away. So Neil Young is like really taking in what's going on in music and the performance art and what people were into. And supposedly he was having like a little slump in his career, which I really can't say because it seems like Neil Young fans have always been Neil Young fans. I don't know. So he comes up with this song, "Hey Hey My," and he's looking around on it, and he meets Devo, and when they meet, it's sort of like two minds met. Neil Young admitted it was kind of messed up for him to make money off of the whole idea of Ohio, a tragedy. He also wrote a song that wasn't factually right. It wasn't Nixon, that first line of the song that brought out there. And then Devo sort of ended up jamming with him. They said that Neil Young had this chord arrangement for the song that became "Hey Hey My," and Devo did their thing where they came up with this really strange riff, and Neil Young was just rocking with them. And they kind of met in the middle. All of a sudden, Neil Young wondered about his relevance there. It kind of gives a rub on Devo, to kind of become famous. And by being really honest and looking around at what the changes were, he ended up making an album called Rust Never Sleeps. And it kind of like gave him a second career that took off, became relevant. And that line in that song, "Better to Burn Out to Fade Away," I've heard that in a lot of songs. First song that comes to my mind is a Def Leppard song in the early '80s. So that just kind of amazes me how you can win over people and kind of admit some of the ways you've might have messed up or profited. And just to get the idea with Devo, not to let them off the hook here with kind of calling Neil Young out for making money with Kent State and people dying. They also got sued for the whole idea of de-evolution because they said they all came up with it. The person they went to school with ended up suing them, and it was the guy got some money, but they just didn't really say how much. It was sealed. It was a sealed record and everything. And that's what's kind of amazing is how history seems to be repeating itself, which is why I wish I did this video a few weeks ago. Oh, thanks. Somebody's talking about, I'm getting comments now, some nice books you picked up in today's video. Thanks, man. I shot that video last night with really bad lighting. I'm glad you can see them. So the whole idea that, to look around and to kind of meet in the middle with people and to jam, Neil Young ended up making a movie that was called Human Highway. And I would like to sound really cool and say that, oh, I saw that on bootleg when I was a kid and stuff. I don't know how I ended up seeing it. Around 83 or 84, VCRs were still pretty expensive, and we had one person in the neighborhood that had one back then that we knew of. And a bunch of us pile up and we would watch the Thriller Michael Jackson video because they recorded it and they would let us watch it. But somewhere along the line, I was around somebody who had like a box of VHS tapes and they put in Human Highway and Devo are playing like nuclear power plant workers and stuff in it. And I remember it was just really odd and it didn't connect with me. I thought it looked really cool the way it was shot. I have no idea when this movie came out and I haven't seen it since, but I found some clips on YouTube. But what I remembered is that "Hey Hey My" song. Devo and Neil Young were playing the song in the movie, and it was like 10 minutes of the most bizarre stuff I've ever seen. Neil Young had a Sex Pistols shirt on, and he cut the sleeves off like the Ramones did off of it, and he's just like wailing that song. And Devo's got their plastic hats on, their plastic headpieces on with pointy heads. But Mark Mothersbaugh became Bougie Boy. You have to see it. It's like this weird little baby, and he's in a crib, and he's playing a keyboard while he's singing it. Just too much for me to handle. Now I think it's genius because Neil Young, the big folk singer, is sitting here with the performance artist of Devo, and it works. They came together. Neither one lost their identity. And that's the whole thing, how it's really strange how through music and this little story that I remember. Oh, cool. It takes, who is this? Flavius Kerdakis. It takes a worried man in the name. Ah, I lost it. I picked up the Crazy Devo laser disc recently. It's pretty cool. Awesome, man. Rob Ripa's out there and stuff. Okay, guys, the comments are popping up. I'll try to read them as far as I can. They kind of pop up and fade away. But the whole point of that little scene that's always stuck with me is that nobody really changed. Neil Young sort of got rejuvenated, had a gut check, and he reached down, came up with this album about what he was seeing, what he was wondering about, and gave him that second career. Devo kind of met in the middle, and they both came together with it, and nobody changed. And that's kind of like the way I think wish things could be with everything when people were, holding a grudge against somebody or they have an idea about philosophy. And yeah, I'm going to hype up Devo here a little bit, but the de-evolution thing is amazing with what I kind of really read or tried to listen to Devo when they talked about it. Devo was highly influenced by Japan, Japanese culture. I haven't seen them really talk too much about it, but I've seen some live performances where there would be them being recorded in Japan, and then they would like slip away to have like one of those little blurbs from the band where they're talking about how much they respected Japan, Japanese culture, and they really influenced Devo. So the biggest difference, they said we've already de-evolved. It's already happened. And de-evolution ends up being a herd mind. Yet Devo will take the Japanese influence, as they put it. This is their concept of saying they're all a unit. The difference is that these are all individuals with the same goal. And the herd mind is where you just pick a side or you're just a sheep and you listen to a herd mind and stuff like that. So it just kind of amazes me how they were to come in there and make this great music together and make this really weird movie, which I kind of think is going to end up being big. Somebody already said they picked up on Laserdisc, so that's really interesting. But just a little story I wanted to get off my chest. It's been in my head because I know all kinds of weird little stories about that, about a lot of things with music and comics and behind the scenes stuff. And no idea if people are really interested in that stuff, but sometimes you just got to get it out so you can move forward and come up with another idea for a video or a topic and stuff. But some great music out there that I appreciate a lot more now. I'm dying to see that movie, and you can look up that clip, "Hey Hey My My" with Devo and Neil Young. One's a 3-minute clip, and one's a 10-minute clip. I highly recommend the 10-minute clip so you can just get the whole idea of how Neil hung in there and got a second career. And then you had Devo who kind of faded away and then had a resurgence in I think it was like 96, they did Lollapalooza. So, I don't know, people are trying to, I'm getting messages now. Let me put that right there. I'll answer that in a minute. So, yeah, just a little rock and roll story. Just the whole idea of like, I feel like we have history repeating itself, and there's a lesson to be learned there, from what I saw. So thanks, guys. Now I can move on and maybe do another live show today. Appreciate everybody that's watching and appreciates the thumbs up already. It's real encouraging, man. Somebody just showed up, man. Sorry, I'm going to do another live show a little bit later, okay? So we'll pop up and we'll try to make that maybe about the commitment to collecting things. Maybe a little talk about that. All right, guys. Thanks for everybody that stuck in there. Thanks for everybody that hung around. We had one person stick through the whole video, so I appreciate it, man. All right, let's go listen to some music.